I want to start off by telling a little bit of a story. So when I was 12 or 11 years old, I went to Norfolk Scope for Monday Night Raw. It was a Slammy Awards to 2011. And I walked into the arena and there were so many just diehard fans of pro wrestling. John Cena t-shirts everywhere. But you know what I wore to that show? A big fake wig with a purple headband around it and a shirt that said, woo woo woo, you know it. Because I loved Zack Ryder. A lot of people love Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder was the man of 2011, and he was the man after that too, regardless if WWE wanted to make him the top star or the bottom boy. When you see wrestlers making vlogs like BTE or Sammy Guevara, I'm very positive in saying that if it wasn't for a guy like Zack Ryder, who made being a wrestler but also having like this internet personality and actual thing, I don't think any of these other guys would have done it. When Ryder first started that show, he wasn't doing anything in the WWE. He was probably close to being on the chopping block, getting his fired. But he used that YouTube show to organically get himself over with the crowd in a way that went from, oh, a few Zack Ryder signs to a few Zack Ryder shirts to a lot of Zack Ryder shirts to a lot of Zack Ryder signs to now the whole crowd's chanting, we want Ryder. Like, wow, that's never ever been done before. And you know how the WWE treated that? They did exactly what they should have done. They put that United States Championship on him in 2011 at TLC, and it was probably one of the biggest pops I've seen in the last decade. And before he even won the title, the month previously at Survivor Series, they were chanting Zack Ryder in Madison Square Garden while The Rock was in the middle of the ring making his return, his comeback to the business. They're chanting Zack Ryder. That's not just impressive, that's astonishing, that's amazing, that's eye-catching. So why wasn't Ryder a WWE champion? Why wasn't Ryder a top guy? Why wasn't Zack Ryder the main eventer? After he lost the US title in a random Monday Night Raw to Jack Swagger, he really didn't do much besides get murdered by Kane by getting pushed off the stage. He lost his girlfriend to John Cena, and he pretty much went back to being nothing. He had to go back to NXT at one point just to become a hype bro. And sure, he had little moments here and there that were pretty impressive. Winning the Intercontinental Championship was a crazy moment for him. Winning the Raw Tag Team title was also an insane moment for him, but that was really more about Kurt Hawkins, honestly. But only a year after he even won those Tag Team titles with Hawkins, basically in his home stadium in New Jersey, New York, Black Wednesday hits. And Zack Ryder's released. A guy that organically got himself over, one of the top guys in the business that really should have been a world champion status wrestler. The guy was pushing merchandise like nobody's business off a YouTube show in the biggest wrestling company in the world was released. But you have to think, what does that do to a person that's put in that much effort, that's put in the years and dedication? He was on the bad version of ECW. He was one of Edge's little sidekicks, and he got cheered over The Rock, and he just got tossed away like that? Do you think that has to like start something in you? It really has to light that fire. It really has to give you almost a new attitude. And I think that happened. It very much happened actually on Twitter. Just like how he got himself over before on YouTube. But all he did was just say that deathmatch wrestling isn't my cup of tea. A fair statement that a lot of people would say. Something that I've said multiple times. I'm not a big deathmatch wrestling guy at all. Not into seeing people getting weed whacked, pizza cut, stabbed, dying, falling off ceilings, falling off roofs, being thrown through cars, being thrown through many layers of glass. It's not my thing, you know? Wrestling's violent, but I'm not really into ultraviolence. And I would assume neither was the character of Zack Ryder. The person of Zack Ryder was an internet geek who likes to collect wrestling figures, wrestle in the WWE. But Matt Cardona is a completely different person, minus the wrestling figure collecting. Matt Cardona was a guy that got fired. Matt Cardona was a guy that put in 12-year plus work for the biggest wrestling company in the world and was thrown away like he was just a nobody. What should that do to a person? Should you just be grateful and happy? Like, oh, well, thank you for my time, Vince. I appreciate you, Paul. No, like I would be pissed the hell off, just like anyone would be. During a pandemic, during a lockdown too. This is a guy that got cheered over The Rock and you guys couldn't even keep him on payroll. That's a little sad. So now known as Matt Cardona, he left the WWE because he got released and he's on the independent scene. He shows up in AEW and like, oh, that's a good spot for him. Makes sense. Teams with Cody, has a match, goes well, but he doesn't stay there, he doesn't get signed. Like, oh, well, that's weird. Shows up in Impact Wrestling. They're not necessarily a young company, but they're a young roster. I don't think that was just it for him either. All he said was that deathmatch wrestling isn't my cup of tea. I don't think it really sat well with one Nick Gage.
you doing? What
the GCW World Champion at the time, the Deathmatch King, the King of GCW. He wasn't a fan of it. Through every trial and tribulation, up and down, bright moment, or dark side of the ring, he spent in that wrestling ring bleeding for what he loves. And Cardona just said, it's not my cup of tea. What you do your whole life's work, not my cup of tea. And they kind of had a little beef on Twitter. Went back and forth here and there. It's like, okay, is this wrestling anymore? Or they actually just don't like each other? Kind of hard to see. And that's the best part of wrestling, when it blurs the lines. Because there's a real reason why Nick Gage really shouldn't like Matt Cardona. And there's a real reason why Matt Cardona shouldn't have to give a fuck about Nick Gage. He was in the WWE. He's a former US champion, Intercontinental champion. He even wrestled for the world title, went 10 seconds, but he wrestled for it. Why the hell would he care about Nick Gage? July 6, 2021, Matt Cardona makes a surprise debut for GCW as Jon Moxley. That's weird. But why is that weird? Because who would think Zack Ryder, Matt Cardona, whatever, would debut in GCW? That's a deathmatch place, right? And that's not his cup of tea, correct? Interesting, because a match between Nick Gage and Jon Moxley, which has probably already happened by the time this video's been uploaded, that's the match everyone wants to see. That's the match that everybody's going crazy for. You got the biggest star in AEW, you got the big star in independence, you got two deathmatch wrestlers, and you got professional wrestling, and you got the fans. But instead, the guy that pulled off the Druid mask was the Long Island Ice Z Internet Champion. He wants to deathmatch wrestle? Okay. Okay, Ryder, I see you. New attitude, I guess, new you. But then it got really entertaining. Cardona didn't just debut in GCW and act like I'm a former WWE guy, look at me. No, he acted like he was a former ECW guy. That's what made people really interested. He started referring to himself as the ECW original, Matt Cardona. And we all know that the Cardona or Ryder that was in the WWE version ECW, that wasn't the ECW, a Sandman and Tommy Dreamer and RVD, the Dudley Boys, Mike Awesome, all those kind of guys. That was ECW. WCW was Zack Ryder, Yoshitatsu, Goldust, the developmental of the main roster, even though they had a developmental already. That was the ECW he was in, and that's the ECW no one cared about. But he constantly just kept comparing himself as if he was this major star, just because he was a major brother. Cutting these promos how Zack Ryder's dead.
Nick Gage says I'm a says Zack Ryder's a well, guess what? Newsflash, Zack Ryder's dead. My name is Matt Cardona. I'm the internet champ, and at homecoming, I'm gonna be the GCW champ.
And yeah, I think he might have just been dead, because Matt Cardona almost met him as well, because when he got in that ring with Nick Gage, oh my gosh, Matt Cardona nearly died. Pizza cutters were thrown at him, bottles were thrown at him. He walked in a white shirt. And as someone that had to go back and watch that match, because I didn't watch the match live, I didn't think it was gonna be as crazy as it was. I'm like, oh yeah, he won the title. No, that's a nice like red tank top. That tank top was white at first. I thought he just decided to wear a red shirt and cut it up. No, that's his blood, sweat, and 12 years plus of wrestling tears. In the first time in his wrestling career at GCW Homecoming, on July 24, 2021, Zack Ryder, Matt Cardona, ECW original Matt Cardona, Deathmatch King now, Matt Cardona, became the GCW Game Changer Wrestling World Champion. Yeah, maybe GCW isn't like a WWE or AEW or Impact or a Ring of Honor. It's not like a major wrestling company, but if your character's big enough, it sure as hell feels like one. That's exactly what Ryder did. That was the first time a GCW World Champions caught my eye in a way that I'm like, this is a little different than what I expected. And I think that's what GCW knew before they put that title on. I'm like, oh, all these other great champions, all these other great GCW wrestlers, Starboy Charlie, AJ Gray, you have all these amazing guys in Game Changer Wrestling, but this guy doesn't like to bleed, but he's willing to. This guy was in the WWE, but he doesn't want to talk about it, but he wants to refer to it. And I think that's a credit to GCW as well, because we've seen guys win world titles. We've seen guys that aren't deathmatch wrestlers show up in a deathmatch scene, and it really doesn't go well. Nick Aldis won the world title at a Combat Zone wrestling show, and the fans were not about it. Matt Cardona was the GCW champion that no one wanted, because GCW fans are not big WWE fans. Everything that GCW fans hate about WWE was everything that Zack Ryder or Matt Cardona tried to engulf into himself. He dressed up like Vince McMahon when he won the ECW title, and it got to the point that he even changed the look of the title. He changed the name of the title to the one thing that I think a lot of wrestling fans still hold a slight disdain for. He called it the GCW Universal Championship. It's not that people hate the Universal Championship or the guy holding it, because we all love Roman Reigns to some extent, but the idea of like Universal Champion versus the World Heavyweight Championship, it's always caused a lot of dissension between WWE and their fans. Cardona did exactly that. He called the GCW Universal Championship. He made a new title and he made the boy spin. Also, he put Velcro on the title, which is honestly my only pet peeve of pro wrestling. F the Velcro on those belts. He got the reaction out of me, he got the reaction out of everybody else that he wanted, and it worked. His storytelling was so well in the day and age of pro wrestling where everything is see-through, everything is transparent, but somehow you're still able to like have a legitimate hate for Matt Cardona while also still admiring everything that he's doing. Every wrestling fan is in everyone's inner circle, so they feel like they're a part of business when they're really not. Yeah, he did lose the GCW World title to Jon Moxley in a match that really should have been advertised. That would have gotten a lot more people to watch it, but the surprise debut was also insane. It was crazy. In Ryder's reaction to it, calling the Chicago screw job, he came to the ring like Macho Man Randy Savage, but with deathmatch on the crown that looked really similar to the Macho King. Sure, he's not the world champion anymore. Sure, he did lose the title, and maybe he might win it back one day. But I think we can all safely say Matt Cardona, in a day and age of social media where everyone knows everything, might be one of the best solid storytellers in the business, because he's also one of the pro wrestlers that made pro wrestling cool on the internet, and he's doing the same thing again. That's not just a character reinvention, that's a character standing ovation. Matt Cardona, the Deathmatch King. It doesn't feel right saying it. Matt Cardona, the ECW original. It doesn't feel right saying it. But Matt Cardona, the GCW World Champion. That feels pretty good to say. And I'm happy that he had that title reign. And I kind of hope the Deathmatch King comes back to the throne one more time.
We going up like 1,000. I'm a flex just like a muscle man Malcolm. We going up like 1,000. I'm a flex just like a muscle man Malcolm. When it just like 1, 2, 3. If you like the channel, this will squeeze. If you like the channel, this will squeeze. If you like the channel, this will squeeze.